Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for coming down. It's good to see such a great turnout for this. It's really good of Mark to let us put this on here. He's a real supporter of the scene here, so buy as much booze, if it's not available now, definitely tonight. Buy coffees, buy pizzas, whatever you can get. Put some money in behind the till. If you haven't got a ticket for the gig tonight, come and see me. I've got a few left. Without further ado, from New York, Chad Lefkowitz-Brown.
Thanks, cats. Thanks, everybody, for coming out. We're going to start with just a tune here. And then I'll get people up to play later. So definitely, maybe get your horns ready at some point. We're going to start just by playing a standard. If you guys have any questions, I'll field them. And yeah, it's going to be fun. Thanks for coming. Different horn. Alright, so here's I Hear A Rhapsody. You cool with that? One, two.
transcribed it?
Yeah, these guys sound great. Awesome. Give it up for these guys. Cool. So, any questions to start?
Again.
So, I see there are a lot of instruments here, so I really like, bringing people up and kind of doing different improvisational games and exercises and stuff like that. So we'll definitely do that in a second. But yeah, again, to start, any questions? What are your questions? You're supposed to say, what are your questions? Because any sounds isolating and then people get nervous. So you should all feel way more comfortable now that I just said, what are your questions? Do you feel the difference?
Yeah. You're embouchure because you play sort of right at the side.
Yeah.
How much contact are you having on your teeth on the top of the mouthpiece and stuff like that? Are you just using your sort of canines on there, or is it almost like a double embouchure sort of thing that you're playing with?
Yeah. I actually play right out of the middle. It's an optical illusion. Yeah, it's one, two. It's what you would expect. Yeah, I've always played out of the side. I've never really thought much of it. I've moved a little bit more to the side recently because, frankly, I think the left side of my mouthpiece got fucked up. And I haven't found one that I like better. But yeah, so it sounds better out of the right. I wouldn't recommend doing that or anything. But, the nature of reeds, obviously, is there's always going to be one side that sounds one way and one side's going to sound the other. It's, I think, pretty much impossible to even them out. So it can become a bad habit if you go over and you start going to the right or the left because one side, one reed is playing better on one side. And if you're playing a reed for a couple weeks, you might go to the side. So that's a bad thing. You don't want to do that. But if your mouthpiece gets warped on one side, then you're kind of shit out of luck. So I think mine's a little warped on the left now. And it just sounds better from the right. I can show you if you want. There's from the right side. Here's the left. See? You're not a sax player. Sax players always hear the difference. Cool. Yeah. What other questions? Oh, actually, I will go off on that for a second. Give me 30 more seconds. Sorry. Even if you do play out of the side, you can still take advantage of different embouchures. So there's that Joe Allard approach. There's the Larry Teal approach. Have you guys heard about this at all? So Larry Teal is a circular embouchure. They're both classical guys, but Joe Allard was the guy that a lot of the jazz guys went to and studied with back in the day. And so the Larry Teal approach is that you have a circular embouchure. It's really even from all sides. I can't honestly think of a jazz musician that would be full out Larry Teal, but here's what it sounds like. So again, I'm off to the side, but it's a circular embouchure given even pressure from all sides. And I'll only stay on this for a second because I know we're not all sax players here. That'd be Larry Teal. Then Joe Allard, Chris Potter does a very extreme Joe Allard. So that's when you frown and you pull out and you release all pressure from the mouthpiece. So your embouchure pulls out and it gives a really free-blowing sound. That'd be. Then if you take more mouthpiece, then that also gets a more extreme sound. So here's the opposite. This is Teal taking less mouthpiece. So Teal is a lot cleaner, right? And more compact, but less aggressive and free-blowing. So I just take the middle ground between the two. And so that's what I do. So even if you're out of the side, doesn't mean that you you have to disregard all proper mouthpiece embouchure technique. So that's something that I highly recommend everybody messes around with, and not to get into equipment talk, but you can mess around with having a bright embouchure and a dark setup, or the opposite, a dark setup and a bright embouchure. So some stuff to think about. All right, what was your question?
Yeah, I was just wondering, like, when throughout that performance that you just gave, it might sound a little bit vague, but like, what was kind of going through your head, given the situation of, like, obviously you're playing with guys who I assume you haven't played with before.
Right.
You just pick a tune and just go for it, play like a really long solo like you did. What's kind of like going through your head throughout the performance?
Right.
Given the situation.
Well, I think each day you're going to have different stuff in your head, and ideally you want to just be in the moment thinking about the music, and you want to get to that kind of like meditative trance-like state where you can free yourself up and you think about nothing. Like when I sound best, I think about absolutely nothing. Frankly, probably about half of the time I was thinking about absolutely nothing and just kind of in that meditative state, and then half of the time I was thinking, this isn't my saxophone, so I was thinking about that a lot. And that can be kind of cool because when you're on a different instrument, it can bring out different qualities. And so for me, there were like some things that I liked about it. I was like, oh wow, it's helping me kind of hear this type of sound. I'm gonna go off in this direction a little bit more, and then sometimes it's like a little less comfortable doing that. Maybe I won't do that. So you can have fun playing different equipment. Like it shouldn't just be like oh, this is my saxophone type of thing. You can kind of embrace that. But ideally, you want to think about nothing. So I actually have a good friend whose father is a psychologist in Hollywood, and he works with a lot of film actors, like famous people who have problems with stage fright. And so he has this theory that if you observe what you do when you're in the zone, like if you have a video from a gig that you played where you felt like that was my best, you'll see that your body does certain motions as a result of that state of mind you're in. And so for me, when I'm killing it, for me, when I'm playing well, I'm usually moving my right leg a lot. And so if you observe something like that and you're having an off night, this psychologist feels really strongly that if you force yourself to do those body motions, it will help you get into that state of mind. So I've really embraced that, and I find that as a result, I don't have off nights as often because I know that things are feeling weird. Let me just focus on emulating myself when I'm playing good. So you take the motions and your just overall demeanor from how you take your demeanor from those on nights and you use what you would be doing if you were feeling really good. And you pretend to feel really good, and then as a result, you feel really good. Yeah. Cool.
Does that always work?
I would say it has a success rate of 80% of the time, half the time. No, I would say 70-80% of the time I get myself out of whatever weird stuff is going through my mind, and maybe I'm grumpy about something in my personal life, or maybe I'm just not feeling good about how the band sounds. Maybe it's something musical, maybe it's something that has nothing to do with music. Maybe it's that I have a bad reed. Sax players know we think about that all the time. But yeah, I would say 70-80% of the time if you really focus on, okay, what do I do when I'm in the zone? Let's make myself do that now. Then yeah, it does the trick. Yeah. More questions? Cool. Maybe we'll play one more tune, and then we'll open it up to questions again, and then we'll get some of you guys up. Cool. So we did something kind of medium down. Got a little medium. That's all right. That was all of us. Maybe we'll do something medium up now. Any requests? You got a personal jukebox jazz trio here. What you got? Great. Have you met Miss Jones fast? Okay, cool. There's some jazz traditionalists that would be upset about that. Don't record this. One, two, 1, 2, one of you I know before asked, what are you thinking in your head? And I went off on the kind of like psychologist thing with the movements and stuff like that. Reminded me, one really good thing that you can think about musically that a lot of people forget to think about, especially when we're soloing, is just rhythm. Like, it's very easy to make your practicing really heavily based on your notes and line construction and harmony and all that. And then you get to the gig and you're so focused on that, you forget to think about, okay, how can I make the music feel really good right now? And maybe how can I develop a rhythmic motif? So one exercise that a lot of times I have people do that we'll probably do in a second when we get people up here. And there are a few different things you can do with this, but the base of it is really simple. You just start with a rhythm, you play the same rhythm over and over again, and you change the notes. You can change the melodic contour, the shape of the line, everything. You change the notes. Then eventually you take two ideas, you start messing around with them. But to start, I'm just going to have one idea. Then I'm going to take two ideas, two rhythmic ideas. You go back and forth, so it'll be like rhythm A, rhythm B, rhythm A, rhythm B. Then I'm going to do like AA, B, B, B. Then I'm going to take fragments of the rhythms, and then I'm going to also displace the rhythms and maybe stretch them out and shorten them. So a bunch of different things that will happen here. I'm going to do it over the course of 2 courses over this tune. So let's just play a couple courses. Yeah. We'll do a little slower just so you can hear what's going on. 1, 2, to decide on what that second rhythm would be. Kind of changed it for the first 2 A's, but then settled into it. So yeah, makes sense how that was all constructed. So maybe in a quick sec, we'll get some people up here to also play, and we'll do that exercise a little bit. But before we do that, what are your other questions?
You've got a really rich tone, and
Thanks.
I was wondering if you, I was wondering if you've got I was wondering if you've got any like exercises or is there anything you do to specifically work? On,
Totally. I'll stay on this topic just for a quick second because I know not all sax players here. Cool. So a few good ones. Hopefully I'll be able to do them on this different saxophone. Really good to do overtones. So you should do a bugle exercise. So that's hard to do. You know, it's hard to have that control and do it that fast. It takes time. But what it does is it means that you're really able to vocalize all these different notes quickly. Because the idea is until you can play it as an overtone, you're not really, for the non-sax players, I was just fingering one note down here, but playing those different notes. And until you can play a note as an overtone, the idea is that you're not really singing to the note properly. So with that in mind, you also want to be able to match the notes as close as you can. That's the overtone. That's a regular note, and you want to make it sound as similar as possible. Notice the overtone sometimes is a little bit more full and sings through more, just because of the nature of the note. You're fingering the bottom note and playing the overtone. So you want to be able to match that with a regular pitch. Pretty close. I've heard Josh Redman do it. You can't tell the difference. You know, so a lot of times it's easy to think with sound, you know, it's like, oh, he's got an amazing setup and he's just done it for a long time. It's like, oh, yeah, also like literally the people that have our favorite sounds, they probably literally like spent the most time working on their sounds. Seamus Blake is one of my favorites. He has an incredible sound. You can't really even tell until you hear him live. It's just mass. I mean, it's just like the biggest tenor sound ever. And talked to his girlfriend about it once at Smalls. That's another story. but I was like, oh yeah, Seamus is like probably has my favorite sound right now. And she's like, oh, I'll tell him you said that because he obsesses with it and it gets crazy. Like he's just all day, he's just obsessing with it, you know. Like, and it can really take over your life when you obsess with things like this. But you know, you just have to kind of take comfort with the fact that okay, the people who do obsess with this the most are the people who have the best sounds. Michael Brecker, his widow, has over 300 mouthpieces. Like we know Michael Brecker is playing 2 mouthpieces. It's probably true, but at home he was obsessing over 300. So, you know, we think of Brecker and it's like, oh yeah, perfect sound, probably didn't have to try. Like, no, he was obsessing with it. He like, Boris Kozlov, amazing bassist, got to do a tour with him recently. He did some gigs with Brecker once. They did a week at the Japan Blue Note. And it was Boris's first tour with Brecker doing that music. And so every night was getting recorded, and he kept on, and they would give Michael the recording at the end of the night. And every night he was like asking Michael for the recording. He's like, oh, I'll give it to you tomorrow, I'll give it to you tomorrow. And at the end of the week, he never got the recordings. And at the airport, Boris was like, hey man, I never got those recordings from you. Like, any reason you didn't want to get them to me? And Michael told him completely seriously, he's like, oh, I sounded terrible every night. I didn't want anybody to listen to it. Isn't that crazy? You know, Michael Brecker. Like, so, you know, you have to take comfort in the fact that, you know, everybody struggles, and the struggle is what makes you better. So just when you're feeling down like that, you just have to say, it's okay. The fact that I'm feeling this right now is what's going to motivate me to practice, and that's what's going to make me better. Oh. Mm-hmm.
What advice do you give to students or players who are sort of at a brick wall, not in terms of improving tone, but in terms of actually knowing what they want to sound like, or what they want their own tone to actually be?
Right. So I would say what's going to guide you in what you want to sound like is taking as many influences as possible. So if you've never done a Lester Young solo, memorize a Lester Young solo. And it can also go on the other end. If you've never memorized a Grover Washington solo, memorize a Grover Washington solo. And then eventually you're going to take all these characteristics from different people's tones, and it's just going to naturally kind of manifest into your own thing. Yeah. And you'll go deeper and deeper into that, you know. That's always going to be something that you're exploring. Great question. What else? I said what? Yeah.
When you were going through college, could you talk us maybe through like a typical day of your practice, or a day that you'd have like have said was a good day of it.
Right.
What were you focusing on? What do you think was most important to be focusing on? Out of the void of infinite possibilities of all the music, like what?
Right. Yeah. Thanks. That's a great question. And
No worries, man.
yeah. Oh, man. Elliot Richards, give it up, Elliot Richards. Yeah. So I really like that Elliot asked, what did I practice in college? Because a lot of times people ask. I've heard people ask me this, and I've heard people ask like Chris Potter this. It's like, yeah, what are you practicing? It's like, you shouldn't really care what someone like Chris Potter is practicing now. You should care what he was practicing when he was developing. Of course, we're all developing, but yeah, when I was in college. Okay, so I mentioned the Redmond thing with the overtones. I had gone to a Redmond workshop where he said that he learned all of Dexter Gordon Go and all of Saxophone Colossus in all 12 keys. And if you think about it, that makes sense. Like, Redmond's straight ahead playing is like, it literally feels like this perfect combination between Dexter Gordon and Sonny Rollins with a modern sensibility. And so I was like, all right, crazy. And then I heard that Chris Potter learned like the whole Omni book in all 12 keys. I don't think that's true, but you never know. So I was like, all right, this is the theme. It's like my favorite players in the world learn things in 12 keys. So that started to be a project of mine in college, and I still try to add solos to that. So I learned I think 2 solos from Go in all 12. I think 2 solos from Saxophone Colossus, and 3 Charlie Parker solos, I think. But the point is, that's something that I worked on, and I still try to work on now. And it sounds really overwhelming at first, but any journey just starts with a single step. You take a line, and you figure it out one note at a time, and you'll get there, and you chip away at it. But one piece of advice for that sort of thing is extremely, extremely important that when you transpose lines, no matter what it is, even if it's Mary Had a Little Lamb, you don't think about interval to interval. So maybe I won't do it, Mary Had a Little Lamb, but I'll do a pretty simple line. Okay, let me make it a little heavy. Alright, so what you don't want to do is think, okay, started on my G, went down a half step, down a half step, down a, I don't even know how to think like this, minor 6. You don't want to think about interval to interval. You want to go to this new harmony, think about the harmony, so probably the chord or the scale that you're outlining. That's really key in transcription, especially horn players. I know every horn player, because I did too. I know every horn player in this room has learned, who here in this room has learned a solo transcription without knowing the chords to the song memorized. Yeah, probably at least every horn player. Maybe the pianist and guitarist didn't. But never do that again. I did it too. Memorize the chord changes first, because you need to know how the line is functioning within the harmony. And once you do, that's going to make you improve so much more with every transcription you learn. So, we have that line. So the way you want to think about it is in terms of the harmony and the notes lining up in the harmony, and probably then the scale degrees. So if you take it up a half step, you don't want to think G up a half step is A flat, F sharp, etc. You think about the line and the shape and the landing points and the scale degrees. So what happens here is we have root chromatic down to the 7. So now I'm going to go up a half step. I'm going to be in my A flat 7. Right. From there we jump down to the 9 or the 2, depending on how you want to think about it. And then the 4. So we take that up a half step. Don't jump into it and noodle through it. Don't just try to kind of approximate and figure it out and hear your way through it. Because ironically, if you try to hear your way through it, you're not actually going to develop your ear. As opposed to if you think your way through it, then you know what note you're playing and you've labeled the sound that you're hearing. So that's what actually improves your ear the most. So up a half step now, it's A flat 7, going chromatically down to the 7th, then I'm going to the 2 and then the 4. Okay, this one's kind of a funky one from here we go. So we wrap chromatically around the 5th. We don't need to think about every note as being 4, sharp 4, 6, flat 6, 5. That's what happens. But it's actually better to just think, okay, I landed on the 4 and I wrapped chromatically around the 5th. So I'm going to do that up a half step. We're in A flat 7. What's the 5th? Exactly. Landed on the 4. What's the 4? Totally. And we're going to wrap chromatically around it. So we got. Then we got 3 root. 3 root, and then we just went chromatically down to the 7th again for the root. And of course, I practiced that a lot, so I'm able to pretty instantly take it through the keys. You're not going to be there right now. That's okay. I couldn't do that when I was in college, you know? And so this is how you want to go about it, and it's going to be a slow process. But even though it feels like you're inching along, it feels like you might not get anything done with a lot of time spent. You're going to show up to the gig the week later, and you're going to play better. Even if it feels like the practice sessions that you were doing that week are just like terribly slow and just like inching along and got nothing done, you're going to play better that next week if you spend your time doing this, even if you only get one line through the keys in a week. It's going to make you improve. Yeah, question in the back.
Do you reckon it makes much difference whether you do it in like semitones or like in fifths or fourths or whatever, you know, because you obviously just go in semitones.
Right, like.
Do other intervals.
Right, great question. So I think half steps are easier for semitones. I think they're easier because you're kind of in the same space of your instrument. You know, if you're on a string or piano instrument, you know, then you even have the visual. So that's what I would start with. And then it's kind of more of a challenge to go through the circle of fourths or the cycle of fifths or whatever they say. So you know, that's what I would do next. Just because it's in a different area, it's going to be harder. Yeah. Cool. Yeah.
There's one for me.
Yeah.
I'm in foundation year, so I'm struggling to change chords.
Mm-hmm. Sorry, say that again?
Change the chords for improvising. What exercises are best for chord changing?
Oh, for chord changing, right. Yeah, so what I would do first, anytime you learn a song, it may be the Ebersole method, which ultimately is not, you're not going to get into where you want to be just doing this, but first, you really do have to learn the chord scales to every chord, you know, and some songs, you know, if there's a lot of changing tonality, anything can really sound good if you spend time really making sure that you know every single scale in the chord and that you can voice lead well with it. Voice leading is just when you know, go from chord to chord and you just kind of step around and you get to the chord tones real smoothly. You know, you're not hopping around. So you can sound pretty awesome, especially if it's a tune that goes through a lot of different tonalities. You can sound amazing just playing the notes in the scale. So that really is always your first step, and you just want to be honest with yourself. Like, am I really in the right chord? Am I really in the right bar? So like, I'll play all the things you are. I'll play a chorus. I'm literally only going to play a scale tone. It's like the Ebersole method, you know. I'm literally only going to play a scale tone in every chord. But again, the key to it that maybe Ebersole doesn't talk about, or probably does if you actually read the book. I don't know. I've never read it. The key is that you want to do a lot of stepwise motion. You know, it's. I was talking about this with someone today. It's like Bach meets bebop. You know, there's a reason why this sounds really nice to wires. That sounds nice to our ears because it's I don't know, who knows? It's just like certain rhythms feel good, you know? that just for whatever reason, that's what sounds good to us as humans, you know, as opposed to this is a little less pleasant. So I completely disregarded the voice. I made sure I didn't land on chord tones. I skipped oddly and widely, and all of a sudden it sounded like I went to an advanced student to a more intermediate student, right? So it takes a lot of time just practicing chord scales if you're really disciplined about doing it the proper way. So here's all the things you got. Two. No chromatic. Cool. So that was purely diatonic. I swear to God, I did not play a single note outside of a chord scale. At one point, I did melodic minor instead of Dorian. I played there was probably a part where you might have thought, it's just whole half diminished, baby. That's technically the chord for in my key a C sharp whole half diminished scale. You know, that's the type of thing that people miss all the time. Like those diminished chords, those are killing. They're really important. Like those are the nuances that really, give the song a lot of life. So yeah, that would be the first step. Like really, and even a step that you have to keep on returning to, no matter how advanced you get, is making sure, hey, can I really play this like bop meets bebop, you know? That was all scale notes and arpeggios. Yeah. And so you notice I was hopping around a lot more there, but I don't think I ever hopped from one scale tone that was not a chord tone to another non-chord tone. I'm pretty sure every time I hopped from one note to another, it was just chord tones. So there's so much that you can do and should do with just those notes. Cool. More questions? Cool. All right, let's get some people up here. Who wants to play? Yeah, awesome. Yeah, come on up. Yeah. It could be bass and drums too. You guys can give these guys a break. If anyone's brave enough. Bassists, drummers? Want to give these guys some relief? Sorry.
Don't say my name. Griffin, you're a good trumpet player. I want to be a trumpet passenger, isn't it? It's fine. Yeah, great trumpet.
What you're going to do, you're going to regret it. You're going to regret it, you're going to wish. You're going to be home tonight, you're going to wish that you go home. See, I left from Saxophone College, I wish I brought you now. I'd have been straight up there. Yeah, you've got to enjoy these opportunities. Yeah, I've seen him. Yeah, I know. Yeah, I've been next to him. I think. I'm glad you're sat there.
I felt like my heart pumped every single time he was playing. I felt so
at the same time, I know
Any requests?
Giant stems.
What did you say? 9 Tunisia. Awesome. All right.
That's what I've been shouting.
So I was thinking, because tonight for the gig, I'm just playing standards. I was thinking I would actually, I never do this, but if you want to send me a message on social media with a request, I'll try to play as many as I can. So if you're itching to hear some trio versions of Giant Steps.
Send the original to him.
Your dream may come true.
Put random calls down.
We're doing night shifts. We're doing night shifts.
Yeah,
We're doing the tag.
Great question. Okay, no tag.
I don't even pay, I only know this.
Oh, really? Oh, let's do something every day. Yeah, out of nowhere. We're going to do out of nowhere, but 9 Tunisia will happen. Nope. No, we're not doing out of nowhere. This is not bad. More requests.
Stolen moments.
Ladybird. Stolen moments. One more.
Giant Steps.
Or to leave.
If we both roughly know it, that seems fair.
Alright, we're going to do Ladybird.
It's in D major.
Yeah, okay. Cool. One, two,
Take the first one.
chordally, the way I would think about this one, just an FYI, and this is what I find all the world-class jazz musicians seem to think like this, or pretty much all of them. So think in terms of numbers, so it's not, in tenor key D major and then G minor and then C7. It's 1, and then it's backdoor 2/5 is what people call this. When it's a 2/5 that comes from below, essentially, and then back to 1, and then a 2/5 to the flat 6, then a 6 minor, then a secondary dominant or a 2 dominant, and then a 2/5 1, and then once you get here, that's the Ladybird turnaround, where it's 1 flat 3 flat 6 flat 9, and that's how you think about it. The reason why is because it then means that you hear all that and you can take it into any key, and it's kind of like labeling things for your ears just as we label colors for our eyes. Like, you see that and you know it's orange. That's that. It's orange. If you give the label to, the backdoor 2/5 as being a backdoor 2/5 as opposed to G minor C7, then you give it 1 label as opposed to 12. So if it's G minor C7 and then in the next tune you see it again, but it's B flat minor, E flat 7. If you never learn that sound, you might not know that it's the same thing. And there are 12 different possibilities where you'll see it. As opposed to if you just label it as being the backdoor sound, if you hear this, and you label that sound as being backdoor 2/5, anytime you hear it, your ear is going to pick it up and know, oh, that's what it is. And if you know the key of the song, then you automatically know what the chords are. So it does a lot more for your ears, labeling it like that. Cool. And then you'll find there are only so many sounds that happen, and so much of jazz is just 2/5s into different areas. So if you label them, then your ears will absorb them a lot faster. Cool. Awesome. So maybe what we could do now is, well, first of all, anyone else want to play? Who else wants to play? Let's get more people up. What do you play? So maybe now we can do those exercises. So what's your name?
Dan.
Dan. All right, cool. So let's have Dan. I say it with my American accent, Dan. So let's have Dan pick a rhythm first over this tune, over Ladybird. So I'm going to count you off, and you're just going to literally like scatter rhythm, like monotonal, like you can go bop, ba da ba, ba, something like that. So first I'm just going to count you off. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. Great, awesome. So now then you're going to take that rhythm, bo da da ba do da, and repeat it. Change the notes, change the contour, anything you want. Do it through the song. And you'll see it adds another harmonic challenge. It's so hard to end phrases, and you're forced to end phrases in this fixed way. So bo da ba ba do da. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. As opposed to ba, I forgot what you changed it to, but ba da ba da ba do da. Makes sense?
What is that?
Yeah, bo ga ba da ba do da.
Yeah.
You went bo ga ba do da. Bo ga ba da da. As opposed to.
Oh, did I sing bo ga ba da da? Is that what I sang?
So it's
I don't even know.
It's like when you're. I've always wondered, like, if you ever take a rhythm class in college where everybody's like da 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 da, like. If someone non-musical were to just walk by that room and see like 30 people like, da 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 da. All right, so what you're saying was 1, 2, 3, 4, ba da ba da ba da da, but you changed it to ba da ga ba do da. So I guess either one. I mean, you can do either one as long as it's consistent. Yeah. And you'll notice that's one of the tricks. Like for instance, I did it too. And, when I did this exercise and I added a second rhythm, I changed the second rhythm and it took me to settle on 1. But it can be good to force yourself to do the one that you start with, I think, because that was the one that you sang and it's a little more natural. So, bo ga do ba ba do da. 1, 2, 1, 2, all of you would do this if you were trying it. It's a really deceptively hard exercise. So it's easy to go bo da bo ga ba do da da and add notes in the middle, subtract notes. And one of the reasons for that is because it's really hard to adjust what we're so used to doing harmonically and then prescribing a rhythm to it that has to stay the same all the way through. Cool. So I'll do that one as an example. It's tough, but yeah, 1, 2, 1, 2. Really hard to match it up with the chords. So yeah, it's really tough. I highly recommend everybody practices this. You want to try one? Yeah. Let's start getting the lines then. Now that you've seen how hard it is. So first, scat the rhythm. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. Ba da ba da ba ba da da ba. Ba da ba 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 da da. Yeah, that's hard. Good luck. 1, 2, 3. So nice. So change in the beginning as well. You know, again, it's good to make yourself do the rhythm that you originally sang because that was a natural rhythm that just kind of flowed out of you, and you don't want there to be the disconnect between you and then all of a sudden you play into something different. Yeah. So notice he had it, and then he got to that 2/5 to the R B flat to concert A flat. And it's like, oh, you know, it adds another thing to keep track of. But the irony is it kind of shows that it's very hard to kind of think about, again, we don't want to think about anything when we're performing, honestly, but ultimately. But when we're practicing, it's very hard to multitask, you know? And if we spend a lot of time thinking about rhythm, that's usually what people neglect, then it can help us ultimately think about rhythm and pitch at the same time. Let's do it a little slower. We'll give you one more shot. Sing the rhythm first. I forgot what it was. Okay, 1, 2, just the rhythm. Ba da ba da ba 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 ba. Cool. Ba da 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 da. All right, so ba ba da 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 da. So 1, 2, a little slower. That's always the moral of the story, and now I owe Dan one. So let's slow one down for Dan. You can pick a new rhythm because I have no idea what the rhythm you did before. It's also a great test of memory. Do you think you remember?
Yeah, isn't it?
Do da, yeah. So well, you ended up playing do da do da ba do da. So either way, whichever one. Yeah. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. To it, then make yourself play only the diatonic notes with that rhythm. And it gets even harder than it already is. So much you can do in practicing feels like a step backwards, but it's a step backwards that everybody's taking, and it's so important to do. Like, I think a lot of times people have this misconception in their mind that, like, Chris Potter his whole life has been practicing, like, you know, like, no, you know, Chris Potter spent tons of time practicing slow. And I mean, you know, I've worked with people who tour with Mark Turner, and they say that he never warms up fast. Like Clarence Penn is a drummer that I play with a lot, and he says that he still hasn't actually heard Mark practice fast. I'm sure he is practicing fast at some point, but before gigs, warming up, stuff like that, he's never actually playing anything fast. So something to think about, for sure. The most important things to practice are usually going to make you feel dumb, and that's okay. Just know that everybody has felt dumb at some point, and still continues to feel dumb with certain things. Yeah. Cool. Nice. Who else wants to play? Maybe we could do one more round of a tune and one more round of questions to finish up. Well, we got a lot of musicians in here. I'm sure somebody wants to play. Bass and drums? Anybody really bass? Don't make me play bass.
I wish I brought my
Guitar? Guitar?
Every old note bit, and then up with
You are excused.
Should be left-handed.
Bassists and drummers are not excused.
Oh, yeah, you're left-handed.
Left-handed.
Oh, is that actually? Oh, it's Whoa! Alright, bass players are excused too. Look at you guys, alright. Well, that's like the one time that so many people are excused from playing in a workshop. Cool. Any other drummers? Alright, well, how about this? Let's one more round of questions first, and then we'll finish up with this thing. Other questions?
When you're playing those really fast licks,
yeah.
What really kind of dumb, easy question, but when you're playing those, what did you practice to be able to get to that point where you're so fluent and you can get up to those pitches and down to those pitches at those speeds?
Right, for sure. Yeah, I mean, so it's just years and years of practicing lots of different concepts. Chris Potter has a great quote where he said at one point that anything that sounds complicated is just a bunch of simple things put together, and oftentimes if it sounds complicated it's just because it's fast. So, I mean, there are just a bunch of different concepts that I've gotten deep into. Maybe just real quick, one would be melodic cells. That's the idea of taking a group of a certain amount of notes. Usually people just do groups of 4, and this gets you like the Brecker type of pottery sound. You take, for instance, I mean this could be a whole workshop in itself, but real quick, like you take a couple different cells, like one cell would be this, and then maybe you could take a diatonic cell, which would be like, you put it together, fix it in one tonality. Like that, then you go down. I swear I'm better at it on my own horn. And so that would be one concept. Another concept would be pentatonics. You learn a bunch of pentatonic shapes, and you learn how to blend them into different tonalities to move in and out of tonalities. You can shift using common notes. That would be something like this. And then you could do triadic bass soloing, where you can do hexatonics. You could use triadic bass soloing, where you're shifting into different things using different variables, similar to how Garzone has his theory. You know. You put it all together really fast, and with a little luck, it sounds like you're doing something super crazy. So that would be the quick rundown. Those were a few concepts that I've spent a lot of time working on.
Thank you.
Yeah, for sure. Great question. Yeah, totally. Cool. Yeah.
Just one more question. What are the things that you look for most in a rhythm section when they're accompanying you? Like, what are some of the things that you go for instantly? Like, I need this.
Totally. Yeah. Personally, yeah, I just love when they have a really deep sense of time. You know, I'm a sucker for like a really big beat, feather in the bass drum. You know, that it makes it feel the time like this. You know, as opposed to like more floaty. You know, which is not to say that I don't love like all motion records and stuff like that. You know, I think that's my tendency is a little more towards that. But yeah, at the same time, it's kind of like what they say about dating. It's like there's a study there where they had people write what they liked most in a romantic partner, and like I prefer women with brown hair or stuff like that. They would write it on paper, and then these people all went to a massive speed dating thing that they did, and then everybody said who they were like most attracted to, but they also like classified those people, and so pretty much nobody actually at the end they selected like, oh, I want to go on another date with this person. Nobody selected people that matched with their preferences as far as their preferences on paper. So I feel like that same thing applies to music too, where I might like say, oh yeah, I really like a bass player that does that, but then I end up playing with someone who's like totally opposite, and it's like, that's amazing, he's like my favorite bass player now. So yeah, how's that for we're hitting all the analogies today. Cool, maybe one more before we finish up with a jam. Yeah.
When you're, I was going to say, when you're practicing your various devices, like chromatic approaches or your pentatonics or whatever, do you have like how do you make sure that you sort of practice it in every possible situation within the chord scale? So for example, if you're doing like chromatic approaches or something, like I sometimes use a little box and then write out like do it over the root and then over the third and then over the fifth. Do you have a method to make sure that you cover everything every time?
Yeah, great question. I think that would partially just depend on the concept that you're doing. But here's what I will say. And again, yeah, this is something that takes a while to kind of like map out and step by step. But what I would say generally is that people become trapped a lot of times thinking about a specific substitution, whereas a lot of our favorite players aren't thinking about specific substitutions, they're thinking about just tension and release. So, for instance, could we, and you guys can sit down, we'll probably just finish up trio. Give it up for these guys. Or if any other top players want to come up with it, go for it. But I'm just going to have these guys vamp over 2-5-1 in concert C. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use every possible other 2-5 as a sub. And I'm just going to do tension and release. The point being, you'll see, there's either out or in. You've got in notes and out notes, in sounds and out sounds. And don't get too caught up in how you use the out sounds. The sooner that you accept that anything out can work, and it's just a matter of how you resolve it, I think the sooner you can move forward with inside and out. And again, this is something that, you need really to learn it. You probably need some visuals and you go step by step, and it could be a whole other, people teach courses and this sort of thing. But yeah, this is something I think you could take away right now. There are in notes, there are out notes, and yeah, the sooner that you accept that it's more about the glue that holds it all together and creates the tension and the release, and it's not so much about just this one substitution and what that sounds like. Yeah, the faster you can move forward with it. So again, it's 2-5-1s. I'm just going to go up in half steps. So my first substitution, first I'll play in, and my next substitution is going to be, I'm going to imply up a half step, and then I'm going to resolve. And then I'm going to imply up a whole step and resolve, etc., etc. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, I just got confused for a second.
No.
Oh, okay, cool. All right, cool. I got confused for a second. 1, 2, 1, 2, from the top. Resolve the 2-5 to the 1. Okay, sorry, he was just doing 2-5. Alright, cool. This will sound a lot better. Alright, so again, we're doing a 2-5-1, 2, 5, 1, and I'm going to go up in half steps. 1, 2, 1, 2, but he won't. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, just literally going up in half steps. I repeated some. I went backwards a couple times on accident and then went back up, you know. But again, like, that was all bop language. I didn't do any pentatonics, any triadic shifting, any melodic style. I didn't do anything fancy. That was all bop language, just doing substitutions. And again, like, you could justify any of these substitutions. You could be like, oh, that was a half step up. Oh, like, that was a minor third away, you know. Like, any of it can be justified in a jazz theory class, you know. So, yeah, important to think about. It's, you know, the idea of in and out is very simple. Any chord is usually going to have 7 in notes, or 8 in notes. 7. 7 in notes and 5 out notes. And with the in notes, there are certain notes that will sound more centered, and certain notes that will sound a little floatier. And with the out notes, they're all going to sound out. No, with the out notes, some are going to sound really like a big grind, and some are just going to be like, oh, that's a little funny. And then if you put them together to apply other tonalities, then it's out. And then if you bring it back in, it's in. Cool. So maybe we'll finish off with one more?
Yeah.
Cool. How about without a song? You know?
Where's the bridge chorus song? Just before?
Let's do it alone together?
Yeah, yeah.
Cool. 1, 2, 2,
thank you very much for coming down and supporting this workshop. We'll see you all at 7 o'clock for the gig, right?
Yeah.
And if you haven't got a ticket, talk to Kayla or myself.
Instagram me song requests.
Instagram him song requests. And thank you very much to Jordan and for Jack for bringing their kit down at short notice so we could actually play. And thank you so much to Sela Bar for putting this on. See you all at 7 o'clock. Thank you very much for coming. Bye.
Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Chad, as well. You know.